morning. As you know, I'm Lauren Cook. I'm your Dean of College and Gap Year Advising. Thank you for joining me for our second Coffee with Miss Cook. A few housekeeping reminders, as always. I know we know how to be on Zoom, but if you can stay on mute as I do a little bit of content up top, I'm going to just talk for a few minutes about gap years, since I was just in Israel. And then we'll just open it up for general questions, whether that's about gap programs, college advising, course scheduling, whatever's on your mind in this moment for the balance of the time. And you can do that live or in the chat, whatever you're comfortable with. We are recording. I will be distributing this to all the parents in the class. I know there were several folks that couldn't make it this morning, so make sure everybody has the information. And we're scheduled to be an hour-long program, and if it doesn't take that whole time, terrific. If it does, we will have a hard stop at 9 o'clock so that everybody can get on with their day. So that's the plan. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and we'll see how I do letting people in from the waiting room while we also share screens. But this is Coffee with Miss Cook, Gap Year Edition. So as most of you know, I was just in Israel for about a week with Masa Israel Journey. They funded the whole trip, which was great. We saw 14 different Gap programs, as well as Hebrew University, Tel Aviv University, Bar Ilan. Did a lot of traveling in that time. So I thought this would be a good moment for me to do a little bit of a Gap spiel for all of you and say a few words about Israel options specifically. There's more information in the handbook with lots of links and things, and I'm certainly happy to talk after this. And I'll also just name that I know some of you may be sure that either your kids want to do a gap year or you want them to do a gap year, and some of you may be sure this is not for you. I will ask you to hang in with me either way and to stay open to the option, because I do think that there are some really strong reasons to consider this kind of programming as just a breath between high school and college. So with that, we'll get on to the slides here. So just so we're all working with the same definition, like what is a gap year? And this is generally a natural break between high school and college. So it's not necessarily like study abroad during college. It's about this intentional moment with growth and transformation, where a student is in developing their interests and their identity before they might continue on with some higher education. And we usually have a pretty good chunk of each graduating class pursuing a gap year. It's been, more like 25 to 30% of each graduating class at JCHS. And the majority of those folks are going to Israel, but not everyone. We've had folks work on a macadamia nut farm in Hawaii and do search and rescue in Iceland and, do a Spanish immersion program in Spain. So there are, of course, other kinds of options, but generally, I think for JCHS, this is also a moment to really explore Jewish identity and perhaps take a moment in Israel. Why might you do a gap year? So this is all sort of research-backed information, which I have anecdotally been aware of from being a college rep and receiving kids coming off a gap year at Mount Holyoke, my alma mater, where I worked. But a lot of the same information was covered during the Masa trip as well. Sorry, letting people in from the waiting room still. So it's time to recharge. You get off the treadmill of high school for a minute, the sitting in desks and listening to lectures and having a bell ring and being told where to go. This is a different sort of experience. There is quite a bit of personal growth and self-discovery that can come from this. I think, as I talk to your students now, they might tell me, well, I like history, I want to go into medicine. And I wonder if some of those interests are because that's what's on the menu that they've been presented with during high school, and whether they understand all the other broader options out in the world. And so a gap year can also help expose them to some other alternatives that might not be on the high school menu, right? And for them to think more broadly about what they want to do. Career exploration, a lot of programs have, or not doing a program, you could choose to do an internship or work for the year. And so to really see if what you think you want to do is what you want to do. Getting a bit more of a sense of direction and purpose. there's an equal number of students who are very undecided and unclear right now. And I think that's actually exaggerated from COVID. I think a lot of our students feel like they missed a year developmentally. I mean, they did in a lot of ways miss a year. So to have a little bit more time to figure out what their own purpose and pathway might look like. There is increased maturity and independence when you live often in a foreign country, but not always, just sometimes independently from your family. And even kids that have selected programs that they didn't necessarily love, talk about the benefit they still got, whether it's living in an apartment with other students or a homestay or something where they really had to navigate some things for themselves, like getting up on time, making their bed without the nagging of mom or dad or whatnot. And then for students, especially that choose to go to Israel or other countries where they might have some history and background, there is this enhanced sense of connection to heritage and identity that I think can be really strengthened and affirming before you go into college, which is often purposely a very diverse sort of stew of types of folks, and to have a real grounded sense of who you are. So I think that all of these things can help students land at college refreshed, focused, and able to kind of better take advantage of what's a pretty expensive endeavor, as I think we all know. So. And then in terms of options, there's so many things you could be doing with this time. And lots of programs that I saw in Israel had, some element of all of these things, but some of them were more focused on travel or more focused on Jewish learning. Of course, that would be more of like a yeshiva or seminary experience. But a lot of them have what they call modules, and you can kind of pick and choose and slide around in your schedule doing any number of these things. Made me want to take a gap year. I was like, why was this not a thing I was thinking about at 18? And note that it doesn't have to be a program. We often talk about gap years at JCHS in terms of programs because that is what the majority opt into. But there are students, as I said, that may choose to travel, that may choose to do an internship, that may choose to do something domestically. And if you have a plan for that time, generally colleges are going to allow for a deferral. And programs sometimes can have, larger price tags to them, but especially when we're talking about if it's something Jewish focused or in Israel, there are a lot of funding sources because I think everyone's goal is to get Jewish kids to Israel to have that experience there. And then I'll just talk real quickly about Masa specifically. So it's a Hebrew word for journey. They want to empower basically sort of a younger generation of Jewish folks to be connected to Israel. They have programs that service students from 16 to 35. So it's a wide range of things. It's not just the gap year program, but that's one piece of things that they do. And they're funded 50% by the Israeli government and 50% by the Jewish agency. So this is something that's really backed by, the state of Israel. And they're connected to the security forces there. They know where all the kids are at all times in all of these different programs, and really provide a safe and informative experience for students. And regardless of what kind of path or program students might choose, all of them access some programming from Masa, which is this umbrella organization for a lot of different flavors of gap year, that do programming like thinking about transitioning to your college campus after this year, thinking about how to talk about your Jewish identity, your time in Israel, whatever your feelings might be on Israel, helping students sort of prepare to navigate the college environment in a pretty purposeful way that I was impressed with. I didn't know that that was one part of the package when you're on a Masa gap year. And as I said, they oversee a collection of gap years throughout Israel, and they have a whole search engine on their website. I mean, the Masa Israel Journey website is robust and has all sorts of information on it, but you can search on gap years there particular. amongst their other offerings. As I said, they don't tend to oversee yeshivas and seminaries. There are a handful of those programs that are kind of more of a hybrid, where you're doing some Jewish learning, but you might also have an internship component or learning coding or whatnot. We saw a few of those. But for families that are looking for, 100% Jewish learning, that's going to be something that's kind of outside of Masa. And so I'm happy to talk more specifically about some options. Know that the whole timeline for any of these kind of gap programs, especially if you're applying to a program, the earliest applications are in December of senior year, and that's often women's seminary programs. And then the other deadlines tend to be now-ish, or January, February, March of senior year. So it is a bit after all of the college admission deadlines, so you can kind of break this process into two pieces. But you do want to start thinking about programs if your student wants to do this, if you want them to do this. And I will also note that Masa made a point of telling us that while, of course, they want students to feel connected to Israel, 90% of their program participants come back to the US. So not everyone is like making Aliyah or encouraged to make Aliyah, but some may choose to. And after spending time there, I can certainly see why. So I will end my gap year spiel there and just do a hard pivot into some dates for you to save for college advising purposes. It's weird how my little Zoom things came up before. All right. So as you're thinking about your calendar for the next few months, and I believe I just sent an email about this, or I'm about to, but we have a planning ahead to pay for college program on March 8th at 7 p.m. Again, that will be recorded. So if you're not able to make it live, I'll push it out to you afterwards. This is a joint program. It's going to be run by Bellarmine College Prep down in San Jose. But there's a number of Bay Area independent schools that will be logged in, invited to attend. It's a very thorough, helpful program that should run through need-based aid, merit-based aid, and things you might want to be thinking about with taxes and that kind of thing as you move towards having this bill coming towards you as your kids head off to college. Then we'll do another coffee with Ms. Cook on March 28th. I'm hoping Ms. Beck might join us for that, and we can talk a little bit about the social emotional parts of this process, the anxiety your kids might be experiencing around it. Maybe you're experiencing some around it. So to talk a little bit in that regard. And then the case studies program will be happening towards the end of April. I think I mentioned that in our last Zoom. This is the San Francisco Independent School. So there are about 10 schools invited to this, and it will be an in-person event at Sacred Heart Cathedral in the city. And I'll send some parking information and all of that in advance. But again, this is a program that's sort of two components. And we have about 100 college reps that come in for this. The first component is those college reps lead small group sessions. This is the case study part where you're doing a mock admission committee. And so parents are in some rooms, students are in some rooms, and you are led through some mock applications, a mock conversation about who you might want to admit, waitlist, deny. You'll vote, you'll make decisions. And then afterwards, in the second component of the college fair, you'll be able to kind of see what happened across different classrooms, whether similar decisions were made, different decisions were made. But hands down, families and students often tell me this is the most useful programming as you're thinking about actually starting to fill out applications. So if you are able to make it, please, it's a Sunday. I think it's going to be 2 to 5 p.m. usually. Have that on your calendar. It's not something that gets recorded or sent out because it is a very dynamic workshop-y kind of thing. So if you can't make it, then you kind of miss it. But there is this mock admission component and then a college fair component for an hour or so. Because there are so many schools there, I often advise folks to really zero in, and you'll get a list of who's in attendance in advance on 3 or 4 schools that are your top places that you really want to try and talk to, because there's often like 1,000 attendees for this program and lines form in front of the table. So being a little strategic about who you want to try and connect with in person, and then anyone that you miss, you can always try and connect with online. And then finally, I've decided to put one more coffee with Miss Cook on the calendar for early May. So once we're past Pesach, we're past the case studies, we'll do something in early May to kind of close out the year for any last questions. But know that I also work all summer. So I'm not on a faculty schedule where college advising ends with graduation day, because of course it doesn't. So I'm accessible to you during the summer month or your kids as we keep moving towards the fall. So I'm going to stop lecturing there, stop sharing my screen. Oh, there you all are. Hello, good morning. And see if you've got questions about any of that or other things that are on your mind in this moment. And feel free to unmute or put things in the chat, whatever works best for you where you are. So what have you got? What are you thinking about?
Hi, Ms. Cook.
Good morning.
Good morning. I have a question about the gap year. We've never thought about that with our older child and with Sasha. But now when you start talking about that, it sounds really interesting. And my question is, do you have any feedback from kids who took a gap year? How difficult it was to get back to school? Maybe, you know, they share that they forgot all the school stuff. And another thing is that how colleges take this. Is there any advantages or disadvantages for, you know, when they accept kids or do not accept kids after a gap year?
Yeah, great questions. So first of all, in terms of the gap of it all, a lot of these programs are at least having you do a little required Hebrew learning because you're in Israel, right? And so making sure that you've got a little bit of coursework happening so that you're developing your language skills and able to do what you need to do on a day-to-day basis. And so you're not completely removed from a classroom environment, but I think most of the students that I have connected with, and I'm hoping to do a bit of a gap panel at some point with some of our JCHS alumni, report that they're really like refreshed and raring to go when they get to their college campus. So I don't think a year is enough to really atrophy your paper writing skills or your test taking skills. And again, some of that is happening depending on the gap program you choose. And there are some programs where you can earn college credits and all the rest. So you do have regular classes as part of the program, which then gets to the great question about how colleges view this. So I think generally, colleges are pretty excited when students want to do a gap year because they know that the student they'll be receiving afterwards is going to be all of the things from that slide, a little more focused, a little more independent, a little more refreshed. I think a lot of students, if they go straight from high school to college, sort of slide into campus feeling like, well, I made it. Right? Like this whole thing, the goal was to earn the grades and do all the things and get the yes from the college. And once I get there, like somehow I'm done. But you're starting a whole new academic experience, right? And so to have a moment to breathe and do something else, then you can really get ready for this next journey you're on for 4 years for your undergraduate degree with a different set of skills. All of that said, I usually advise our students to still go through the college process in senior year, even if they're thinking about a gap year, because do it while you've got the supports around you and it's part of the culture. And to not necessarily bring up with colleges, like I'm definitely not going to actually land on your campus next fall, because until, you know, you've signed a contract and, you know, all of that, you don't know, you could change your mind about the gap year. And we do want to go through the motions with colleges feeling like, I think they might be more inclined to admit, because they're dealing with their numbers from year to year for enrollment, if they think authentically that you may arrive in the fall on their campus. Once you've got that admission offer, now you're in a bit more of the driver's seat and you can have a conversation with them about, well, what does it look like to get permission to defer and whatnot. For most colleges, it's just giving them 2 to 3 sentences about what you're planning to do. And they'll say, great, we'll see you next year. We'll check in with you, make sure you still intend to enroll in a year, and then send you the paperwork then. The caveat to all of that is the UC and the CSU system can be a little bit trickier with a gap year. I found that CSUs, they don't allow gap years. So it doesn't mean you couldn't do it. You would probably just reapply to a CSU. So this would be like Cal Poly, San Francisco State, whatnot, during your gap year. Now, fortunately, that's the easiest, quickest application. It takes 30 minutes to do. The UCs, we've found some varying responses. You will see on all of their websites, they say like, we don't allow gap years. And then the fine print, it says, unless it's religious or military. And so if you want to go to Spain to do a language immersion program, that's probably not going to work for UC Santa Cruz or UCLA. But if you intend to go to Israel, they usually interpret that as religious, regardless of whether you're going to a seminary or whether you're going to go do a coding camp in Tel Aviv. And so we use that loophole. And so we've had a lot of students that then the next year have enrolled at UCLA, Santa Cruz, Davis, Cal. A lot of those we've had successful gap years to Israel, but it can kind of depend based on the school. So as we start sort of narrowing down your students list a little bit, we can think about how certain programs might play with certain institutions. But generally, I find it's not a huge hurdle.
So if you're accepted, then you, and all of a sudden you decide to go to a gap year program. For some colleges, that's okay. For some colleges, it's not.
Yes, yes. And really, it's the CSUs, the California State Universities, where uniformly it's not okay. Just about everywhere else, we can kind of figure something out as a general rule. Now, if you choose a program where you get a whole year's worth of college credits, and there are some of those out there, then you've got a question of, well, am I now a transfer student? But these are finer details we can get into based on what students are thinking about.
And in terms of how much it costs, you said that Israeli MASA programs funded 50% by government, 50%, but is there like portion that, is it like fully funded or we still have
no,
to
so
pay?
It's not free. Don't want to give that impression. And and they're, and it's not also the same as a year of college. We're going to tell you about $60,000, bills. But generally the programs I saw were anywhere. Now there's this thing called Eco Israel where you live in a yurt and you're using composting toilets, and it's a very, agriculture back to the land environmental program. That was like $12,000. And then I think some of the most expensive where you're also getting college credits, and so there is some tuition kind of stuff you're paying, was around $30,000. Now those are ticket prices. A lot of these programs offer their own financial aid. MASA has grants on top of that they can give to students. And then our local federation and Jewish Family and Children's Services also offer funds to try and get folks to Israel, because of course it's in everybody's best interest to get some of our young people to Israel. So there's a lot of different ways you can knock some of that price way down. So again, it depends on the particular program and your financial circumstances, but this is not a free opportunity. And ones that have a service component actually are less expensive generally. And that would also be non-Israel things like doing city year, that kind of where you're doing some kind of volunteering and service as a core part of the program.
Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions on any topic? Oh, we got something in the chat. How do you talk to students about gap year? Right, individual or group info sessions. So, so this was a question, to get them to start thinking about it on their very first junior questionnaire. The last question was, are you thinking about a gap year? If so, what are you thinking about? And then I come back to that question in that first meeting with them just to see where they're at. I usually, if I remember and we're not zinging around in the conversation, if they've said, no, I'm not thinking about it at all, I will give them a 60-second spiel on, well, let's just, here's a couple of things to think about. And then I did hope in November to have an alumni gap panel program. That was difficult to put together this year. I've done it in the past, but alumni were hard to nail down. I think pulling people back onto Zoom this year when they can be out in the world enjoying themselves has been difficult. But generally, I will try and bring in past JCHS students to talk about their experiences. And then right now we've got a series of gap visitors coming to campus. So Young Judea, their year course program, was on campus yesterday. They talked to several of your students. Talia, the rep, said it was one of her more successful visits. There were 8 or 9 kids that signed up from the junior class to get more information. And we'll continue to have gap folks coming in. So it's also kind of in the water right now. So yeah, that's some of the ways I bring it up. And then a South American Israel split gap year. It's a question in the chat. There are some travel programs where you might have a home base like in Jerusalem, but you are going to other places where the diaspora might be. And so commonly South America is part of those programs, as well as sometimes South Africa. There's some diverse places. Kivunim is one program, which is actually not under Masa's umbrella, that does that kind of purposeful, several weeks in different locations that aren't Israel. But I'm not aware of something that splits even time between South America and Israel. It's not to say it's not out there, but we could do a little Googling and see. What else? Karen, I've seen you unmute once or twice, so I don't know if you've got a question on your mind.
Hi, I was wondering if, like, we're looking at summer things to do, and if JCHS has experience with like UC Scout and how that works with, like, I was looking online and it sounds like you have to get the school's approval to add the UC Scout courses to the transcript. Do you have any guidance on that?
Yeah, so what Karen's referring to, there is an online offering of high school courses that the UC system offers called UC Scout. It's not dissimilar from BYU. Some students have done Brigham Young University classes, especially geometry if you want to advance during the summer. And so, yeah, UC Scout. So a couple of things. Summer, first of all, it's great to have some kind of activity. Does not have to be continued academic work, but that's great if it is. Camp, work, internships, travel with family, having something so they're not just kind of on the couch all summer, although they do need a break for a little bit. If you do want to pursue some academic work during the summer, we do have kids that sometimes do UC Scout, BYU, or local community college classes during the summer. You cannot do JCHS graduation requirements generally during the summer. So know that, and that's one reason why we have to just like sign off on outside classes that you want to take. It's a great time to look at economics or an extra language class or sociology or criminology or something that's not in the typical high school curriculum. But you will want to talk to Mr. Brody if this is about trying to advance in some area or kind of like skip a level or whatnot. Geometry is something we definitely allow for, but outside of that, it gets a little dodgier. I will say in terms of quality, we've gotten mixed reviews about UC Scout. So we find more consistent feedback about quality that's positive for BYU. They just have such a robust online high school. And yes, this is like the Mormon school in Utah, but for whatever reason, they've got this really large and strong and not indoctrinating online high school coursework. There's also something called National University that's online. And then of course, City College or Skyline or, the community colleges in the area often have both in-person, but also online offerings as well. So if you want to do college courses over the summer, those are some of the best ones. And if you've got a form somebody needs to sign, you can send that to me or Miss Bregman, the registrar. It's usually Miss Bregman that ends up signing off on it. And if you've got more questions about where to do things or what to do, again, Michael Brody, the assistant head of school, is usually the best place to start for navigating that.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Sorry, what is UC Scout?
Yeah, so UC Scout is the University of California offers some suite of online courses for high school students, and it's called UC Scout, so it's differentiated from actually taking like a course at Cal for Cal credit. So these are high school classes, and it's just one of many different providers online where you could take a class. What's great about UC Scout is that everything's UC approved. And that's one thing you might want to look for with online classes. If you're going to take something at City College or BYU, being UC approved means it's eligible to be weighted into your UC GPA if you're applying to a UC campus as a high school student. So like all of the JCHS classes are UC approved. We'd want you to, if you're going to spend the time and money on an outside class, to make sure it's UC approved. So UC Scout, obviously run by the UCs, it's all approved.
Okay, thank you.
So a couple questions in the chat. We've got, what's the typical time frame for applying for gap years? So usually doing some research on it over the next year is helpful in narrowing in on programs you might be thinking about. But the fall is really about the college applications, and a lot of those are getting out the door in November and early December. And then often, so December of this year, you would turn your attention to thinking about applying for gap years. The first deadlines are in December. Those are often women's seminary programs in Israel. And then some other, more generic programs or non-denominational programs might have like if you apply early bird in December or January, we'll knock $1,000 off. And so some of those crop up at that time, but often January, February, or March are more traditional times for most of the gap year programs to have students apply. And some will take applicants up until like 2 weeks before the program starts, so you could decide after graduation in May or June, like, I think I want to do a gap year. Who's still taking applications? And very much make that work. Obviously, that happened during COVID for the class of 2020. There were a lot of kids that pivoted into a gap year at the last second because they didn't want to, go to UCLA from their dining room table. So there is some flexibility in that. But generally right now is around when kids are applying, getting some decisions back and starting to weigh decisions. I've got a Zoom with a senior later today who's trying to decide between 2 programs he's admitted to. So that's the timeline. And then there's another question about deadline for students to decide about doing a gap year. Great follow-up question. Can they apply and opt not to do it? Absolutely. If you get into a gap program, you don't have to go until you've signed a contract and paid your first installment of things. You can always opt out. And March, April, May, that's a time where we're trying to sort out what offers do students have from colleges, who will allow for what gap years are you thinking about? I had a student 2 years ago who Cal Poly was her #1 choice, and she was thinking about a seminary, but when she got into Cal Poly, because they don't allow gap years, she said, never mind, we're not going to do the seminary thing. This is my first choice. I want to just go straight to college. So you do have wiggle room, and that's a lot of my April meetings with seniors to sort of suss out the options, think about the best plan. If you or I need to check in with a college about their gap year policies and sort some things out, that's the moment we do it. But most colleges want to know if you're coming by May 1st, you can still say I'm coming and then request a gap year. But anyway, we're getting into the weeds, but that's the timing where we start to make some final decisions on this stuff. And we've got a hand raised.
Yes, hi, thank you.
Yeah.
I want to ask I'm not sure how to word it because I'm not sure what I'm asking. Are there programs, gap year programs that are not a full year, and how is that accepted?
Terrific.
Or meaning, how is that, how do does the colleges typically see that?
Yeah, so there's sort of 2 ways I want to go with this. One is if the family and the student is driving and thinking, that I only want to do part of the year doing this. And sometimes colleges might admit you for the spring when you didn't ask for that. So there's 2 different things that can happen here. Yes, there are definitely gap programs that can be for shorter amounts of time, 4 months, 6 months. And actually one very common path is the Mehinas in Israel. This is what Israeli students are engaging in to sort of prepare to go into army service, but they often have overseas kids involved as well. And every once in a while, one of our students might do a Mehina and then decide, I want to be a lone soldier and enlist. But most of the time, they come back to the US after that. And the great thing for our students with those programs, they continue to brush up on their Hebrew skills, and they're really interfacing with Israelis in a purposeful way. It's often kind of like a 50-50 grouping, and that's like a 6-month opportunity. And then you're kind of done in the winter. The Israeli kids are enlisting, and our kids come back home. But there's other options, and certainly some of the language immersion programs or cultural service kind of programs in other countries, they can be for shorter amounts of time. You have kind of a menu of choices. And I will say, when I say gap year programs, we're not usually talking about 12 months. we're talking usually about 9, maybe 10 months. It's kind of an academic year calendar, might start in late August and end in May. And you have some time off with the Hagim. So it's not this like consistent full year, like as soon as you graduate, you're headed off into that program. You get some breathing room. Now, what I said about colleges, increasing numbers of schools, especially places that are in this kind of mid-tier of being pretty selective, but not, the kind of Ivy League institutions, are doing more staggered enrollment. So some kids are coming in the fall, and some kids are being admitted to come in the spring, which is generally January, February. And they will do that because their current students choose to study abroad, usually for a semester. It might free up a bunch of beds on campus, and to keep enrollment consistent, they're trying to have a fall class and a spring class. It lets them bring more kids in that are qualified, but they're just, are finite numbers of spaces in the fall. And so some of your kids, may be applying thinking they want to go somewhere in the fall and get a January or a spring offer, and then try to figure out, well, what do I want to do with this? If it's their first choice school, they may want to take them up on that offer and then figure out something to do with that summer and fall time that might be meaningful. That could be something close to home. That could be an internship. That could be just spending time with family and friends or traveling, but it might be some kind of a shorter gap experience. So we can certainly talk about those options too. But know that spring admission is possible.
Just in continuation to that, are there programs, can you do basically, can you do 2 programs? So one of the programs that Tamara's looking into is a 5 months program. And I'm thinking, great. Well, one option is for her to do a different program after. Do these exist?
Absolutely. You can kind of sew together some different experiences. We had a student do like a language immersion program in Spain through the Council for International Education for like the fall semester, and then do search and rescue in somewhere in, the Scandinavian countries in the spring semester. I had one student who was admitted for spring to Babson College a few years ago. That was her first choice. She did Kivunim for a year, traveled to different countries, and then came back here and did an internship for the fall, and then went into the spring at Babson. So she had kind of like a year and a half off. So yes, you can absolutely put together some different kinds of experiences. And I'm happy to help do some brainstorming on that. Other questions? We're covering a range of topics here. This is great. I can say just a few words about course scheduling. Hopefully most of your kids have decided on classes for next year, have put in their course schedule because it's due tomorrow. But if you haven't, I do want, and if you have some anxiety about all of this, know that I've talked with a lot of your kids, and I have actually been popping into some JS classes to talk about advanced JS curriculum. But generally, I think there are a lot of juniors who feel like next year needs to have a bunch of AP classes. It needs to be as rigorous as humanly possible. I've had to talk some students down from taking 8 classes and, not having a study hall. Generally, keep in mind that while curriculum is important, it is one piece of the puzzle for colleges, and every piece matters. And we want them to have some rigor and a step up in their classes, and also maintain strong grades and be able to fully engage in their extracurriculars and enjoy their senior year and get some sleep. So I think folks have generally been making some wise decisions on not loading up too much on everything. But if you have any questions or concerns about things as you're kind of finalizing schedules, please feel free to email me. Anne, I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah, and then I'm interested in the chat question that just came up too. But I'm just occurring to me, like, are the kids, I think it used to be more common to do this kind of travel or exploration after college. So I'm just wondering, like, developmentally, what's happened? Is there something that's happened with our digital age that's making them need to, or that the high school's gotten more pressured? Are they ready to take on the world in this way and get as much out of it as they would if they waited till after college? Just any thoughts about all of that?
Yeah, such a good question. And I do think that there are certainly folks that still graduate from college and then go try and have adventures for a little bit. But I think our economic situation has been really, less casual in the last 10 or 15 years. I think folks have felt upon graduating from college, and as college has gotten more expensive and they maybe have a serious student loan load that they have to start thinking about repaying, unless you are fortunate to be in a financial situation where you're not going to graduate from college with some debt, that cracking into that early on and thinking about your return on investment and all these sort of business words, that I don't think the luxury for everyone to think about, now I'm going to take some time off that I've gotten my degree, exists in the way that it might have when college was much more affordable. You could pay for it with working throughout the year or whatnot. And I also do think developmentally, there found to be some benefits to taking a breather between high school and college. There is something about this age. And there was one GAP program that we talked to in Israel that talked about it really eloquently, that it's like this train that's leaving the station when you're 17, 18, your brainstem is at this certain place still growing and you're figuring out who you're going to be as a human, where if you don't have that experience in this time, like it doesn't come around again. You're not in that developmental place again. And again, with the cost of college increasing so much and being what it is, wanting to feel like you're not going to kind of burn through that freshman year being a little lost, not sure what you want to do. Again, this is some subset of students that are in that headspace of still exploring, figuring out who they are. Some are very certain. But taking a little extra time before you start paying those higher bills and start accruing that debt to just be sure that the major you're thinking about, the program, especially folks that are thinking about an engineering school or an art school or something that, is going to start siloing them a little bit, that's what they want to do. Right. So, so having a moment to just reaffirm that, that may be another reason why it's more popular now. So, yeah. And then, yes, there was a question in the chat about, can you discuss visits to colleges? Absolutely, because we're headed into that time. And let's just think generally about what you want to be doing in this moment and over the next few months with the college search. Pesach break is a great time, especially if you're traveling to see family or whatnot, to try and add a few college visits on. And then next summer is a great time to think about visiting schools. And then remember that a lot of places are also offering more robust online visits. So at least knocking out like an information session online where you're hearing a bit from, an admission director about an overview of the school, what they're looking for in applicants. Maybe they've got a student or faculty member there to chat as well, and then save the visit for actually touring the institution. You will want to plan ahead. Some schools you can book a tour, a week or two out, and some fill up. And so you can think about some of the highly selective places that a lot of people are applying to. You want to give yourself a little bit more runway to try and start planning those visits, schedule something a couple weeks out. You can find everybody's got calendars online now where you can look and see, okay, April 9th, I want to visit this campus. I have no idea what date April 9th is, but anyway, and it'll tell you at 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. We've got two different sort of introductory info visits. Click on that, put your name and address in, sign up, and then you'll get a confirmation email, usually with parking advice and all of that. So you do need to kind of plan in advance. And I do want to encourage you to do that. It's fine to do a drive-through of some campuses if you just don't have time, or if the tour is booked up on the day that you're in the area. But if you're able, it's usually a 1 to 2 hour experience to get that intro overview of a school. And it is going to be much more useful than trying to do a little kind of real estate tour on your own. Now, if they've got a friend on campus or JCHS alum and that person wants to walk them around, terrific. Now you're getting like the real inside scoop. But again, it's also going to be a little subjective, right? It's like their slice of the school and purview of things, where admission is going to give you a more general overview. And what else? You don't have to visit every school that you're thinking about. You can also think about types of schools, go to a big public research institution, go to a smaller suburban campus, go to something urban. There can be stand-ins. So you can also, if your kid is like, I have no idea what I want, check out a couple of types of schools to help them start to hone in on, oh, this feels too busy or too overwhelming, or this feels a little quiet for me. I had pictured college as being, more people, more energy, all of that, and just get a sense of what's working for them. And then encourage them to make appointments with me when they come back, or you can, shoot me an email or whatnot to let me know how it went, what they thought, and how that's informing what's happening, hopefully in SCORE, as they're updating their lists and kind of refining some interests. Michelle, you've got a hand up. What's up?
Hi, Ms. Cook. Thank you. This is super helpful.
Good.
I had a quick question about just kind of what you were talking about in seeing the representatives. And I just know with Jacob last year, it was a real kind of, nudge and wasn't successful because he was worried about missing classes in
Mhm.
order to see the reps. And I was wondering if there was a way for them to see them like during lunch or after school, because like you're saying, senior year, I saw that too with Nathan, that like I can't miss class, the harder classes sometimes. So I wanted to see what your thoughts were about that.
Yeah. So Michelle is referring to when colleges make appointments at JCHS and show up for half an hour to give their spiel at the school. And these happen mostly in the fall, and it's really concentrated in September and October. All your kids were invited to those this past year, and many of them went, although, a good subset of them did not. And that's okay. But I will say in senior year, it can be really, really helpful. And faculty really do work with me and work with students to try and allow kids the flexibility to go to those, because that is the most efficient way to interface with the college rep, rather than, and we do have seniors that are fully missing days of school. I've got a student out 3 days this week to go visit schools in New York City that she's been admitted to because, there's a limited amount of time, and, the decision deadline is coming up on May 1st. So if you're going to miss school, you can do a planned absence form, and that's okay. But literally missing half an hour of class is not the end of the world. And in fact, I do give faculty a heads up in advance. I ask kids to RSVP and SCORE, and it's one of the reasons I have a rule about you need to RSVP for a visit 24 hours in advance, because I'll send Dr. Burrell, a list saying, it looks like a lot of AP Bio is planning to go to the WashU visit tomorrow. And she will write me back and say, oh, I was going to give a quiz, but now I'm going to move that if I'm going to be missing 7 students. So know that it's not a hard and fast wall that they're coming up against if they want to go to a rep visit and they've got a rigorous class then. So talk to me, talk to the faculty member. When in doubt, we try to default to letting the kid miss class to go to the visit. Now, if they start to abuse that, if I've got a student I'm seeing at every college visit, we're going to have a conversation about that, because, we do want folks to be judicious and have integrity in terms of the choices that they're making at school. But I would encourage them to go to those college visits, because it is a chance to connect with reps and turn what can be an objective process into something a little bit more subjective, because when they've met you, they get to know you, they're rooting for you, right? This was true for me when I was a college rep, and everybody's human in this process. So, but also if you go to visit a campus, that counts. That's like the biggest kind of connection to make with a school. If you're emailing with a rep, if you go to an online visit, these are all ways to get to know a school, to have them get to know you. And for some places, demonstrated interest, I've mentioned this before, but it's a thing. And I know Tulane is like the king of demonstrated interest. If you open an email, you're getting like a little check mark somewhere from them. If you go to an event, if you go to campus, if you come to the visit at JCHS, all of these things make you more likely to be admitted. They are literally counting the ways in which you interact with them. And if you have not interacted with them before you apply and you don't do much, I've had the rep email me and say, well, it seems like a good student, but he has no contact with us, so I don't know why we would admit him. Whether that's fair or not, that is the way, Tulane does part of their process. So great question about when will we know which colleges will come for visits at JCHS. So college reps tend to plan their fall travel over the summer. So I will put up our calendar for them to start booking usually in June, and visits will trickle in. And as a college books a visit that might be on your student's list, your student will get pinged through SCORE. They'll get an email saying, Temple University is coming on September 22nd. I see you have Temple on your list. You can RSVP for it here, learn more about Temple here. But there will also be, there's a calendar that's on the college advising website, and I have a paper calendar that's outside my office too, that has throughout the fall, the colleges that have booked visits. So if something is not on your list, but you're still curious about it, there are other places that you can see it. And colleges start sending me like crazy amounts of posters for me to hang up at school to advertise as well. So, all right, I'll just name it. Is 8:50, 10 more minutes. Any other burning questions that folks have about college, admission, gap years, courses, life? Or have we
Hi,
moved on?
this is Sharon.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could provide somewhere a list of colleges that are local, like in driving distance, that are good representations of big research universities, liberal arts colleges that are more like East Coasty sort of liberal arts colleges. Do you have like a list somewhere where we could access?
Yeah, so in the college advising handbook, under the section on college visits, I do have some lists in specific areas, geographic locations of types of schools, smaller schools, mid-size, large schools. And then if there's something that's unique, like an art school or an engineering school or whatnot. And I do have something for the Bay Area, obviously. I would say just off the top of my head, for an urban campus, just going to USF, you do not have to be interested in USF, but just get a sense of what that's like to have sort of the hustle and bustle of city blocks. St. Mary's College over in Moraga is kind of classic small liberal arts college environment. Santa Clara down in Santa Clara is kind of a mid-sized suburban private school. Going out to UC Davis, to Cal, to Santa Cruz, those are going to give you the larger public research institution environments. But all of those environments are very different. I mean, I think I always, and who knows if you're a Star Wars fan, but I think of Santa Cruz as being like on Endor. You feel like you're going to see Ewoks popping out of the redwoods. Where Davis is like flat and hot, and bike culture is a thing. Like there's just a million bikes going around on campus. They feel very different. But just hitting some of those campuses is going to give you different sizes, frameworks, energies, all of that. And that can then, you can start applying that to places in other parts of the country. Yeah, and Marina, did you have a question? I saw you unmute for a second. Maybe not. All right. Anything else? We have really covered. Oh, yes.
Yeah, just a quick question. Sometimes it's really difficult to get any information from our kids. I'm like, yeah, mom, everything is all right. If you see that they are not doing what they're supposed to do, or they're procrastinating or something, will you let us know?
Yes. And
there are like some deadlines or timelines or frames that they have to
absolutely. Yeah, so know a couple of things about my internal process. Right now, it's kind of journey fever on campus as we get closer to, especially, Israel. And so I am not, knocking down your kids' doors right now. We do have some gap visitors, and we're dealing with course scheduling, but there's nothing in particular they need to be checking in with me about. Once we're past Pesach, everybody's going to be required to have one more meeting with me for the end of the year. So I will check in with them again. I have a whole spreadsheet of your class. There are certain things that we do at certain times that I'm keeping track of, who's done it and who hasn't. And so they're not going to slip through the cracks in that way. Obviously, you all are CC'd on everything I send them. And I'm sorry if it's too much Lauren Cook in your inbox, but I do want you to be aware of what they're getting. I found that's also a helpful kind of backstop to making sure everyone's informed on what's going on. And also know that you can at any moment email me and say, what is happening with my child? And I'm happy for us to be having some back channel conversations, or after I meet with them, if it's helpful for you, for me to send a little summary of it, please let me know. There's some parents in the room right now for which, those back channel conversations have been helpful with their older children. I know that not all teenagers are as forthcoming as you might like, and I would like to keep tension in your household also under control for the next year while they're still home. So if I can serve as a conduit for information, happy to do so.
Thank you.
Yeah, you were welcome. Yes, Karen.
I was wondering if you have any recommendations for websites that kids can use to help understand the different majors that are out there and how their interests might connect with actual majors. I remember a few years back seeing a really cool one where you could like click on your interests and then it gave you like interviews from professionals or people who had studied the majors, but I can't remember what it's called.
Interesting. That is such a great question. I do think that College Board's Big Future, and I'm usually loath to recommend College Board for anything, but Big Future, their search engine website has great information. And some of that has come out of, they also have a book called The Big Book of Majors, which I have one in my office people can borrow. It's like the size of a telephone book, but you can also get it for $20 on Amazon. I will also say, I know I talked up UScience a lot at the beginning of the year. That is a free product to you in SCORE. SCORE and UScience are breaking up at the end of this year, but you still have access to it for free, I think, until June 30th. And I would encourage you to use it. Now, SCORE is going to bring in, we've heard, I can't remember what it's called, but there's a new kind of personality thing that they will be launching over the summer. But I really like UScience. And so while you've got access to it, and you can download your results and keep them. So even once it's not in SCORE anymore, you've got it. But it's a series of brain games and things that will talk to you about how your brain works. And I did it. And, you know, it was saying I'm like good at seeing patterns in numbers and that my vocabulary is especially large. And it helps you sort of narrow in on some things that are within your capacities that you're good at and fields for which those skills are relevant, and then the majors that you might pursue for those fields. Now, it's going to give you a lot of stuff. It might be 30 different kinds of careers, but you also see patterns around them. Like mine was like psychologist, social worker, educator, you know, like a lot of like helper professions. I got a lot of social emotional stuff, I guess. And so then you can start kind of following the breadcrumbs to, well, what colleges offer those majors and what do they include and all of that. So the games take, you know, it's like a 2-hour thing, but you can do them in little bite-sized chunks. But I would encourage your students to do that while we still have access to it the next few months, because that can be really helpful and interactive.
Thanks.
Yeah. Where on SCORE can we find UScience? Excellent question, Sharon. Thank you. If you, on the student view under like my information, it says like my colleges, and then I think it might say like my career or career path. There's something there in the left-hand navigation where if you click on that, the screen will come up with, you know, go to UScience, and it takes you into their separate kind of games. But it will tie back into SCORE anything you choose to save in there, like majors that or careers that make sense for you. And you can download this like 30-page PDF report on you and how your brain works, which I definitely have on my desktop, and I am 46. But to just, you know, figure out a little bit about how skills that you have a natural aptitude for, or a developed aptitude for, I should say. All right. Can you access it from the parent login? That's a great question. I am not sure. It might only be available in the student portal. So that might be, if you talk about college on Sunday afternoons once a month, a time to sit down and say, let's go look at UScience together and maybe do the first game together. So yeah. All right, I will name that it is 8:59, so I think we're going to close here. I hope this has been helpful. I hope you have a good weekend. I hope your kids have a safe launch to Israel. This is an exciting time. And as other questions come up, please don't hesitate to be in touch. And till next time, bye.